In my experience of running an online coaching business for the past 5 years, what I've found is that testimonials are probably one of the, if not the most impactful conversion tools that you will have in your toolkit to get new clients. The unfortunate part about that is one, I think they're way underutilized. And number two, I think the reason why they're underutilized is because most people don't know exactly how to capture them in a way that creates compelling content. Most coaches, they think that if they just ask their clients, hey, tell me a little bit about your experience working with us, they're going to get great content that converts. But what I found is that in most cases, that's actually what's keeping them stuck. Today, what I'd like to do is challenge you about the way that you think about testimonials for your business and help you to understand a strategy that I've invented and deployed into my own business that has created a significant impact on how they perform. And it's a simple method that I call guided testimonials. While most coaches are getting zero conversions off of the testimonials that they post, I have videos that are making me thousands of dollars, and I continue to use and reuse them for things like ads and email sequences. But before I get into that, my name is Josh Holyfield, and I own a company called Aimpoint Digital Marketing that I recently started after scaling my online fitness business to 7 figures and helping other guys do the same. What I focus on doing with Aimpoint is pretty straightforward. We build systems, not bullshit. We don't clone coaches that use the same shitty tactics and tricks to get clients, and we actually build brands that are scalable. So first things first, let me share with you what most coaches think about testimonials. What they think, or at least what I see them do, is they just basically turn on the camera with their client and ask them to tell about their experience. Then boom, on the other end of that, they're going to have social proof. But what's interesting is that those coaches who take that strategy or that approach are also the same ones who struggle with sales. You need to have a strategy behind everything that you do. You need to be very specific. You need to be very deliberate. A lot of coaches will either try to do a Zoom call where they do the testimonial, or they'll just ask the client to record something and it comes back and it's pretty much unusable. Or what they'll do is they'll give you some surface level bullshit like, my coaching experience was great with these guys, I definitely recommend them. The truth is, nobody really gives a shit about that. And that's not the content that's going to convert clients, especially for a high ticket offer. You need to be addressing objections, and you need to tell the story of the client's transformation, not just the surface level stuff. And most of the time, the problem has nothing to do with the fact that the coach sucks at recording content or the client isn't telling an authentic story. It's that they don't truly understand what information a new prospect needs in order for them to make a buying decision. The client typically just wants to say nice things about you and he's doing you a favor. And most of the time it's him being inconvenienced, so he just wants to get it over with. But you and I both know that prospects, they're not buying because they think somebody's nice. They buy because they see a logical path from where they are to where they want to be. And your testimonial's job is to draw that picture. So here's what I want you to take some time to consider. Every single lead that you have that comes into your pipeline, the only reason they haven't bought from you is because you haven't handled all of their objections with your content. They've already raised their hand and expressed interest in what you have to offer. They know who you are. And so at that point, the only thing that would be missing is asking for and then closing the sale. So if you've done everything right up to that point in terms of that indoctrination process, the only reason they're not making that buying decision is because you haven't handled their objection. And so if you look at it through the lens of objection handling, what the testimonial does best with is showing that prospect firsthand, hey, look, this guy with the same story, the same situation, the same background that I thought was unique, that I have, is actually something this guy was able to solve pretty easily. And look at the change that he made. I'm like him. I want that outcome. Okay, I believe you. Maybe you can do it for me. Most of the time, the reason why people aren't taking the next step in your process is because they have doubt. They're uncertain. They don't have clarity, or they just don't believe that what you're offering or what you say you can deliver, you can actually deliver. Your testimonial can solve all of that if you do it right. And so before I get into the actual framework that I want to teach you, I want you to ask yourself a very simple question. Do I want testimonials that are going to stroke my ego as a coach and make me feel good because my prospects like me? Or do I want testimonials that are going to actively work at making me money by converting new prospects, new leads into customers? Random testimonials without following a specific buyer psychology framework, great for making you feel good, not so great for making you sales. And so basically, this is how my guided testimonial system works. Our goal is to systematically guide clients through a series of questions that directly follow the buyer journey. And we ask our customers the question with the expectation that they're responding while they're talking about us, not talking to us. So just to give you an example, it would be something like, tell me about your experience working with ABC. Working with ABC has been incredible because, and then they go into their experience. So you basically do it almost Jeopardy style, where they repeat the question back to you in their answer. And then what you do is at the end during the post-production process and your editing, you cut yourself out of the video. And what you're left with is a really solid story of that customer's journey that touches on all the points that it needs to in order to work as an effective sales tool. So enough talking, let me actually show you what this looks like. Very first thing, guided testimonials are basically serving to do four things. They're building authority for us by showing that we have expertise. They're building social proof by showing people who've actually succeeded with our approach. They build trust because it's showing authentic stories, creating an emotional connection with the prospect, and that we actually have the ability to deliver on the things that we're promising. And they handle objections in the way that I described earlier, where they basically address those concerns through the client experience. Okay. So basically the idea behind this is we want to edit ourselves out. And so we'll guide the interview, and then the final video will remove ourselves from it. So it just gives that pure client perspective without any interviewer bias. It's natural sounding. It doesn't feel rehearsed. It's coming straight from the client. All you're doing is just making sure that they're touching on every aspect of the buyer journey so that they're giving the full story of their transformation. All right. So before we actually get into the testimonial aspect, one of the things that I've found is that when dealing with clients who don't own online businesses or don't deal with like what we're doing here, the quality of their video setup is terrible at best. So they're going to have maybe their iPhone on Zoom and they're going to have the camera looking up their nose. There's going to be some type of distraction in the background. It's not going to be stable. The video is not going to be eye level. There's going to be audio in the background. So the very first thing I always tell guys before they get onto the testimonials, make sure you're in a place that doesn't have distractions with good lighting, where you can set your camera phone or your laptop ideally in a spot where the camera's eye level and we can get a high quality frame. If they get onto the testimonial call and they don't have that, I don't even do it. It's not worth my time. 90% of the time, if you get a video like that that has poor quality from a video or audio standpoint, it's going to be unusable, and then you're both wasting your time. So let them know ahead of time kind of what those requirements are. And then obviously, if they don't respect that when they get onto the call, don't waste your time. It's happened before. I'll spend 30 minutes doing a testimonial and they think that they just did me this huge favor, and it was something that just ended up getting thrown in the trash. So make sure you're testing the audio quality before you do the call. Make sure that their background noise is at a minimum. And while you're doing the testimonial, you always want to make sure that you mute your mic. That way, there's no background noise coming from you or your uh-huhs or mm-hms that we naturally have a tendency to do. You want to make sure that there's no other audio other than what's coming through their microphone, their voice authentically, and the quality of the video is what it should be. One of the other things that you have to consider is that we're going to record this testimonial most of the time in a horizontal frame. And you always want to do that kind of like you would see on YouTube, because for the longer form videos, you want to be able to have the option to put those testimonials in there, let's say as a VSL or a YouTube video or something like that. If you record it in a portrait, then it's basically unusable for the purpose of horizontal frame videos. But also keep in mind, if you have the recording and you're doing it horizontal, they need to be far enough from the camera so that their face doesn't fill the whole screen. Because then when you chop it to a portrait, it's going to distort the video. It's going to look like crap. Most of the time, what I like to do is have it so that the client is in the frame horizontal. It starts around their belly button, and then the top of their head is basically right below the top of the frame. And that does really well. Then you have the flexibility to cut it into a portrait or use it in a horizontal. And it's a piece of evergreen content that you have forever. So again, like I said, your goal with this testimonial is you're going to instruct the client to speak about you or the service provider as if they're sharing their experience with a third party. So you'll ask a question, what was it like working with me? And then they'll say, working with Dave was XYZ. I had this experience. So they need to make sure to repeat the question back to you in the frame of as if they're speaking about you. And most of the time, what I found when doing this is they usually do a really good job at the beginning, but then as you get going, you mistakenly make it more of a conversation and then it screws up that frame. Or sometimes they forget, they start talking to you, and then you kind of have to reset, like, hey, don't forget, you have to talk about me, not to me. So again, remind them to use your name rather than you, and just make sure that they're talking about you. All right. Now, the other thing too is, before I get into the questions, understand that these are a starting point. Depending upon how they respond, you should be following up with clarifying questions so that you can extrapolate all the information that you need from them to tell the full story. You, as their coach, should know their full story. You should know the background on their testimonial. Don't lead them. Just use the way that you frame the questions to continue to peel back layers of their story until you get the things that you need for the testimonial. It's very important that you don't just let them ramble on about something, because that's when the ums and the ahs and the uhs and the Ks and the filler words, and if they use those too much, especially for people who don't have experience behind camera, it makes it really hard to edit that video so it's high quality and that people actually understand what they're saying. So you want to make sure that you're very poignant in the way that you direct the conversation so that it's direct and tactical in the way that you're approaching it. The idea behind this is just to follow the buyer journey sequence, and all you're going to do is just ask these in order. The idea here is we want to say, hey, like, where were you when you started? What made it so that you felt like you needed to get help? Like, that's question one. Question two is going to be talking about what were the big challenges that you struggled with and what was the goal that you were trying to achieve. So what was the outcome that you were seeking? We want to understand the core outcome that they were pursuing and what the big thing that was stopping them was. Like, who was the enemy in this story? And then the idea here is, when you started coaching, you move into step 3, which talks about how did we overcome that challenge with the program? What was it about the program specifically that made it easier for you to pursue that outcome despite that? And then you actually ask them for an example. Can you share an example of how that helped you? And this is going to give life to the story where you can put it in there. Then you can talk about when you initially signed up or before you signed up, what were your big objections? What were your concerns? Why were you skeptical? What was it about this that made you unsure before you signed? And then after that, you go into question 5, is where we basically stamp out that objection, which is, what was your experience like despite that objection? What were the key outcomes that you got? What was that transformation? Where were you when you started? What was the experience like? What were the big challenges? How did we overcome that challenge? And then where are you now is basically question 5. And then you go into question 6, where you ask them, if you knew somebody who was on the fence about signing with us and they weren't sure, they're in a similar situation that you were, would you recommend they join? And then why? Make sure you get the why do you recommend that? What is it about that experience that makes it feel that it's good for others too? And that's basically it. And then typically at the end, what I'll do is I'll ask them, do you have anything else that you want to add? And through the process of going through this, you should be able to get a good 15, 20-minute long testimonial from this person where they're telling their full story. They'll tell where they were, what their challenges were, what their objections were, why they weren't sure, what the experience was like, where they are now, and if they recommend you. And now you have this full buyer journey that establishes the authority, the credibility you need. It handles the objections, it creates social proof, and it becomes a really strong piece of content. Now, of course, after the interview, what we'll always do is obviously thank them, confirm that they're okay with the content being shared. And a lot of times what I'll do is, after I edit the video, before I post it anywhere, I'll send them a draft and say, hey, look, I just want to make sure that this is consistent with the message that you feel you want to share. Can you give me the thumbs up to post this final version? We want to make sure that the video that you produce is actually in context with their actual experience. Now, what I do is I have a repository that is actually inside of the school group of all my sales calls, testimonials, things like that. And then for my business, not only are the testimonials integrated into all the landing pages, the marketing collateral, but I also have a testimonials page on my website where every time I do one, I add it to the list. Now, the things that you should use them for. What I like to do is I get the long version, put it on the website, send it out, and then I'll clip a short version into a YouTube short and then write a caption that tells their authentic story. and then use that for social media. It works really well. Especially using those as ads, I've personally found that the video ads of client testimonials perform really well, especially for more bottom of funnel content where maybe the person has already taken the application, but they didn't schedule a call, or they're somewhere on the fence about working with you. A lot of times those testimonial videos will be what it takes to push them over the edge. I'm going to close this out just so you know, typically what I do is I integrate this testimonial capture process into my fulfillment. And so typically the week prior to them finishing their coaching, I'll schedule a testimonial in with them, because what this does is it also feeds into my retention strategy. Because at the end of the testimonial, I'll ask them, okay, what goals do you have for yourself next? What's your plan next now that you've achieved this transformation? And so it does a really good job of framing the next conversation that I'm going to have during their next check-in, which is, hey, like, it's time for your renewal. Let's talk about next steps. I know last week during your testimonial, you mentioned XYZ. Well, here's how I'm prepared to deliver those next steps for you if you decide you want to resign. So you actually use that testimonial experience to make it so that you can come to your next check-in with them prepared to extend them for another iteration of coaching. This is really smart. It works really well because it does a couple of things. Number one, it does a psychological frame where they have it in their mind what they're going to do. And they've already basically spent an hour-long call saying how great it was working with you. Well, now the next logical step was like, if you love working with me, you got the outcome, and you already have a plan for where you want to go next, wouldn't it make sense to keep working with us? And so that I found works really well. But again, like I said, once you have all these testimonials in place, at a minimum, put them into a library, include them in your email sequences, especially the ones where you're nurturing people and after they schedule a call. And what I can tell you is that the difference between the coaches who struggle with credibility and those with bulletproof social proof is the successful coaches have a very, very impeccable system for capturing these transformations, and they document everything and they put that stuff out there. You have to be consistent with sharing case studies, transformations, and testimonials, because that's going to be the bread and butter of converting people on the bottom of your funnel. So with that said, I hope this resource is useful for you. What I'm going to do is, if you're in the school group, I'll put this resource, the actual document, down below this video. You can download it, make a copy, use it. If you're watching this on YouTube and you'd like a copy, you'll see in the description there is a link to join my free school community. Sign up. You can get access to this resource as well as all the others I provide. Best of luck to you. Hope this helps, and we will talk soon.